For our premiere episode, we are talking about the giant, hairy, lovable, and terrifying Sasquatch. Some call him Bigfoot, king of the cryptids, but one thing is certain: found footage fans and filmmakers love him. So what has made this enormous, dangerous forest dweller such a popular mainstay in the found footage world? Bigfoot's journey in popular awareness has really been an interesting one, and found footage filmmaking has actually been a part of it for a good deal of the journey. While there have been beliefs in Sasquatches and other similar creatures going all the way back to indigenous people from ages ago, the thing that made America pay attention to Bigfoot was a bit of footage shot by two men in Northern California in 1967. Robert Patterson and Robert Gimlin were out camping when they shot less than a minute of footage that they claimed was Bigfoot. And it would become known as the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and it gained a lot of publicity. For a lot of people, it was all the proof they needed that Bigfoot was real. Sasquatch spotting became a very popular phenomenon from others looking to capture footage and gain eternal fame. But it did something else that no one expected, and it doesn't really receive the credit it deserves. The Patterson-Gimlin footage was a perfect model for the style used in found footage movies for years to come. The shaky handheld camera footage was a little bit blurry, and the style was clearly unplanned and seemingly accidental. Now, whether the footage is real or it was staged, it established a very specific style that most found footage films have been modeling ever since, whether they realize the influence or not, frankly. In fact, the style was seen pretty quickly after that footage was released. In 1972, 5 years after the public saw Patterson-Gimlin for the first time, an indie director named Charles B. Pierce released a film called The Legend of Boggy Creek. Now, the movie isn't about Bigfoot exactly, but it is about a Sasquatch-like creature called the Falk Monster in Pierce's home state of Arkansas. Now, the movie was a huge hit in drive-ins across the country, making at least $20 million. And while the movie is not exactly a found footage film, it is similarly styled. It's technically a docudrama that has staged interviews with supposed witnesses, and it also includes dramatic reenactments of the sightings that they describe. It really has more in common with TV series like Unsolved Mysteries, which also did dramatic reenactments and occasionally covered supernatural situations. But believe it or not, the thing that had the most influence on later Bigfoot found footage movies was television. It started back in 1977 when Leonard Nimoy from Star Trek hosted an investigative show called In Search Of. The series focused on investigating big mysteries, and more than one episode was dedicated to Bigfoot. America's interest in Bigfoot just kept growing. In Search Of was very influential on found footage in other ways, too. In fact, director Eduardo Sanchez said that In Search Of was one of the primary inspirations for him and Daniel Myrick making the Blair Witch Project. And of course, Sanchez would later go on to make his own Bigfoot movie. The spectacular 2014 film Exists. But getting back to TV, In Search Of ran for 6 years and sparked continued interest in Bigfoot. And then, of course, there's the Discovery Channel specials. You've definitely heard of or at least seen a couple of these, right? And they were very popular in the early millennium. But the big boom came in the late 2000s after the Sci-Fi Channel found success with reality shows like Ghost Hunters. Other shows rushed to find their big hit in similar investigation spaces, but instead of ghosts and demons, they started looking for cryptids. So series like Finding Bigfoot, Expedition Bigfoot, and Mountain Monsters introduced the general public to cryptozoology methods and terminology. And audiences liked it just as much in the 2000s as they did with In Search Of in the 70s and 80s. So what is it about Bigfoot that makes it such a popular focus of found footage movies? I think part of it is that Bigfoot is a uniquely American subgenre. There are, of course, plenty of other cryptids we know from around the world, from the Loch Ness Monster to the Abominable Snowman. But it's hard to argue that Bigfoot isn't the most well-known and popular example. Also, the history of the Sasquatch extends back in American history to before it was even officially the USA. Many indigenous tribes have stories and legends about them going back far longer than recorded history. In some ways, it is one of America's original and strongest myths. And I also think that, like Eduardo Sanchez, generations of filmmakers have been raised on In Search Of, Legend of Boggy Creek, and that original Patterson-Gimlin footage. So they're all steeped in the knowledge and the style, and they've been inspired to make entries of their own. Now, one of the reasons I think that it must come from a place of passion more than a hope to make big profits is that, unlike some other found footage genres, Bigfoot movies can be challenging to make. While the location, usually the woods, is easy enough to find and usually free to shoot in, it can be difficult to create a convincing, good-looking Bigfoot effect or costume, even for movies with a big budget. And most Bigfoot found footage movies don't have a huge budget to work with. But the filmmakers still make them, and we still love them. And I think it makes sense that we're drawn to them, especially in our modern age. As the world becomes more developed and driven by technology and we lose the closeness that we used to have to the environment and the wilderness, I think we hope more and more that there's still something mysterious out there for us to discover. We love the idea of something that defies easy categorization, something that isn't quite a beast or a man. We're fascinated by a creature that confounds science and taps into something mythical and maybe even mystical. And then, of course, there is that distinctly American desire to find something that no one else has found, record it, and make a ton of money from it. So that desire for notoriety and wealth is also what makes it believable that someone would intentionally go into the woods and try to get close-up footage of a creature that has the strength to leap from tree to tree and could potentially rip your arms from their sockets without a second thought. But, hey, that's just my opinion. Let's hear from someone else who knows a lot about this subgenre.
Hi, my name is Corey Grant, and I'm the director of Bigfoot, The Lost Coast Tapes. So Bigfoot, The Lost Coast Tapes tells a story about a reality show host named Sean Reynolds. He's basically trying to make a comeback in his career when he gets news that a hunter in Northern California has recovered the remains of Bigfoot. So he gets together a ragtag reality show crew and they drive up to Northern California. And needless to say, when they get up there, all hell breaks loose. So the inspiration for Bigfoot, The Lost Coast Tapes came just from my interest in Bigfoot. As a kid, I was always watched these documentaries, and just the mystery and the mysticism of it all always just caught my attention. So, I wanted to do a different kind of movie from my previous movie, which was a traditional feature film that was a comedy. So it's like, let's try to do a horror thriller. And at the time, found footage was really taking off, and we thought that it might be an interesting way to tell this particular story. And the writer, Brian Kelsey, actually grew up in Northern California and encountered, his uncle encountered a real Bigfoot, and they actually got a cast of the foot, which is this. This is a real Bigfoot print. And so he ran off, and we talked back and forth about some ideas, and he came back with the script, and that's how we got it going. A couple things that people don't know about the making of this movie was we took a 30-piece crew up to Northern California to shoot on location in Humboldt County, deep in the forest. It was an hour-and-a-half drive in and an hour-and-a-half drive out every day to start shooting. Before we left, Greg McDougal, who was our creature artist, he was designing a Bigfoot suit and mask. The whole kit and caboodle was real nice. He was designing it in LA, and he ran out of time before it was time for us to go to Northern California. So we had to take the whole creature shop up to Northern California and bring it on set with us. So because it wasn't ready, we shot everything in the forest and around Humboldt County that we could without the Bigfoot, because it wasn't ready yet. So finally, when we got through shooting everything, it was time for the Bigfoot to come out. So what ends up happening is we bring the Bigfoot out. We're all excited. We see it. The suit is magnificent. Greg did a hell of a job. And he's mostly seen at night. So we're lighting the scene, lighting it, getting everything put together. I'm blocking it, whatever. And we put the suit on with the actor, and we go out and we light it up. And the one thing we never did was do a camera test with the material that we use for the suit. So when you put the lights on it, it made it glow like a gorilla mask, and it looked fake as hell, and it drove me crazy. I was like, this is over, the movie's not gonna work. I'm panicking. And then I said, hold on, I started thinking, what could I do? Because we were already shooting, money's been spent, this is it. And then my idol, Steven Spielberg, came to mind. It was my whole Jaws moment. That's why when you watch the movie, you don't see as much Bigfoot, but it actually adds to the drama, the tenseness in your imagination to make you think something's there that's really not until we finally reveal. So that's why all you people over the years who've been mad because you didn't see the Bigfoot, but you love the movie, you love it because you don't see it as much. And that was a mistake that we fixed, and it came out. So mistakes happen, sometimes for the better, most time for the better. You got to be able to adjust. So that's one thing that people don't know.
You don't venture into the wilds after this monstrous beast on your own, and that is why I have assembled some of the toughest, smartest Bigfoot spotters ever to survive a Sasquatch encounter. I'm of course referring to the experts and superfans that are sharing their thoughts this week in the segment that we call Found Faculty.
Bigfoot is a fascinating creature, mostly because we don't have any proof that Bigfoot exists. Now, personally, I want to believe. I think it would be very cool if there was an undiscovered primate wandering the forests of the Pacific Northwest. But he's a perfect candidate for found footage because the only proof that we have of Bigfoot's existence comes in the form of literal found footage. The most famous example being the Patterson-Gimlin film, in which Patterson and Gimlin, while out hunting, actually, they were out searching for Bigfoot, stumbled across the beast that we now refer to as Patty walking across a creek out in the Pacific Northwest. So it kind of writes itself from there. If you're making a found footage movie, Bigfoot is the perfect subject because there are television shows, there are Bigfoot hunters, there are legions of people that spend their days pointing a camera at Bigfoot. And the question is, what would happen if they actually found one? And what if they found one and it was pissed?
I almost feel like Bigfoot deserves to be named the patron saint of found footage just because so much about the Bigfoot mythos taps into, the heart of found footage. Back in the 1970s and 80s, when we first had Bigfoot mania, it was inspiring all of these people to go out into the wilderness and try and encounter / get their proof of Bigfoot. And so they were taking along camera equipment, photography equipment. In the cases of those people who could afford it and who had the resources, videotape equipment. And that's what some of the earliest found footage movies were built around, was this idea of going out into the wilderness to discover and record the unknown. Cannibal Holocaust, one of the very first, if not the first found footage movies, is about going into the jungle to find this mythical lost tribe. The Blair Witch Project, the found footage movie that kicked off the craze for the modern age. The perhaps first modern found footage movie is about going into the woods to discover this mythical witch. And so back in the 70s and 80s, America as a culture was acting out the central conceit of so many found footage movies, which is just deeply intriguing to me.
I can't even tell you when my love for cryptids even began, but I've always been a Bigfoot enthusiast. I had this really cool opportunity not that long ago where I went to a Bigfoot museum, and it was just really cool. Tons of stories about people's experiences. But I think cryptids innately, right, are literally made for found footage. I mean, everything we've ever been given is either a blurry photo or some weird something caught on camera that's just off site and you can't quite see it. And so I think cryptids in general are just a perfect subject for found footage in general, which I may say a lot because, found footage is such a great subgenre and it works in so many different ways. But Bigfoot in particular, I think is really great just because there's a lot of theories around Bigfoot and where he comes from. And I mean, cryptids have been around since the 1800s. I mean, the Jersey Devil has been around for forever. And there's even Bigfoot stories predating the 1950s. And, you've got things like Mothman and Nessie. And so you've got these things that have like real historical storytelling behind them. I mean, cryptids, especially Bigfoot, go way back to oral storytelling and just this idea of taking something that you might have seen or you've heard might exist, and then taking that story, making it your own, and then telling someone else. And that's how we've gotten tons of cryptid stories over the years, dating back forever ago. And it makes it really interesting to put in a found footage setting. What my favorite, like top tier Bigfoot found footage is Exist. And I had, the pleasure, I've talked with Jamie Nash, who worked on the design and the story for that film, along with Eduardo Sanchez. And it's such an interesting thing to see Bigfoot brought into even like a more modern sense with like security cameras and in this found footage subgenre. And it's been really cool to see what people come up with, even in ones that I didn't think maybe were executed as well. Bigfoot's made for found footage. And I for one, think we need way more cryptid based found footage. Give me more Bigfoots. It's literally designed for found footage.
Hello, my name is Mathew Fisher from Massachusetts in good old USA, director for Boombastic Films, directed a film called The Fair Game, a short film that made its way onto the anthology film American Sasquatch, a very Bigfoot-themed anthology film. Also directed a segment called Ford, Found on Road Dead, which I believe can be found on the To Die For anthology film, because found footage films are to die for. Fair Game follows a father and son hunting team as they go on an excursion into the deep, wide woods to find some elk or some bears or some deer, anything they can go bang, bang and bring down and eat. Now, in this forest, unfortunately for them, Sasquatch be lurking, and Sasquatch don't take kindly to being bang-banged and brought down and eaten. He kind of likes to do the eating. So, in fact, that's kind of what happens in this story. The inspiration for Fair Game is local to us. We have local folklore, an area called the Bridgewater Triangle. Now, within this area, this triangular area of land, all types of crazy, weird things happen. You know, ghosts, goblins, ghouls, anything from Sasquatch to, you know, giant snakes to Puggawudgie to all types of, you know, crazy things that go bump in the night. We're currently working on a film called The Wicked Hollows, which is wrapped up in that area as well. So we thought it'd be a fun little short to do, because we weren't going to put Bigfoot in the film, but it's got such rich lore with the townspeople that we said, let's just do this short to kind of introduce what's coming forward, which is The Wicked Hollows. My favorite part about making Fair Game is kind of the run and gun guerrilla style of it. You don't really have to worry about too much lights and stuff like that. For the most part, the subject that you're shooting, you don't really want to fully show anyways, because it's all supposed to be accidental, you know, stumbling upon these things. So just creating that element of the accidental surprise and findings was probably my favorite part of doing it. I know my least favorite part of doing it was sliding everywhere in the mud, because it was right after a rainy night and it was some thick, deep mud for sure, sliding all over, getting shoes stuck in it, which sucks. Anybody out there that has ever had that happen to them can definitely relate. The bogusness of stepping into some mud and coming up without a shoe, that definitely sucks.
Wait, have I seen this movie before? Oh no, it's just that scene that happens a lot. But you know what? I'm not mad about it. It's time to talk about familiar flourishes. Now, the flourish we're talking about regarding Bigfoot is one that is actually mostly unique to found footage films. I'm sure it has come up in regular Bigfoot movies at some point, but nowhere near as much as in found footage. And I like to call it not just Bigfoot. Now, this one seems pretty self-explanatory, right? What I'm getting at here is that even though all of these movies are definitely Bigfoot movies, we frequently get revelations or twists that in some way reinterpret the expectation that Bigfoot is the sole or central antagonist of the story. So why is this significant? And honestly, why would you go through the trouble of making a Bigfoot movie only to have someone other than Bigfoot steal the spotlight? Well, think about it from the point of view of a found footage filmmaker. They're not working with huge budgets. So a lot of the work making this film effective has to be in the storytelling. They don't have a ton of money to make an elaborate Bigfoot costume or the kind of stunts and set pieces needed to have a ton of complicated action. So how do you solve that? You make the narrative more interesting, complicated. I think this is why we see the not just Bigfoot element mostly in found footage, because the very few narrative Bigfoot movies don't have that same problem. So that brings us to the question of what are those other things if they're not Bigfoot? Now, I want to be careful. So as I talk about a few of these things, I'm not going to mention any specific titles because I don't want to spoil any movie. So don't make any assumptions based on clips or movie titles here, because I promise that I am not secretly revealing anything about any particular movie. But sometimes it's an obvious one. Whatever the creature is, it's just not Bigfoot at all. Maybe it's another monster, maybe it's a big mutant bear, whatever, but it's not Bigfoot. Next, it could be that there is a Bigfoot and something else. Maybe it's another kind of monster or supernatural creature, maybe even something from another dimension or another planet. Or sometimes it's just thematically not just Bigfoot. And by that, I mean that there is a Bigfoot, but the motivation of the Bigfoot is a surprise. Perhaps the creature lost its mate to violence, or it's protecting its child, or maybe it has a human companion hiding somewhere in the woods that it doesn't want you to find. Now, regardless of what it is, mark my words, about 40% of the titles in this category are about Bigfoot, but not just Bigfoot. So that's your familiar flourish for this week. Now let's hear from another outstanding filmmaker from the world of Bigfoot found footage film.
My name is Dillon Brown, and I am the director of Tahoe Joe and Tahoe Joe 2, Bigfoot Conspiracy. Tahoe Joe and Tahoe Joe 2 both center on a cryptid creature, a Bigfoot-like animal that basically lives around the Tahoe National Forest just outside of Reno, Nevada. And the films deal with disappearances of people who are basically looking for the creature. And myself and my co-star Michael Rock are the main protagonists of the film, where we are sort of caught up in this conspiracy on, is this creature real? Firstly, and secondly, who's trying to hide, its existence, and who doesn't want people out there looking for it. So we've built this really big kind of conspiracy angle that's tied deeply with Bigfoot lore, and then shot it as a faux documentary series, much like The Legend of Boggy Creek. The real inspiration for making this movie was my love of monster movies. There was a VHS box art at the video store when I was a kid that had a creature on it, I was renting it. Living up here in Reno and not far from Tahoe, it just felt natural to go the Bigfoot route because there are a lot of Bigfoot believers up here. It just seemed like the perfect place to tackle our own Bigfoot story. Tahoe Joe is not a real legend around these parts. We made it up for the film, but it's starting to kind of catch on. And I have actually heard people who don't even know me talking about Bigfoot and actually referring to him as Tahoe Joe, which makes me really happy that we've sort of created this new old legend with like people's false memories thinking they've told this story before. But no, it's just a couple of guys making movies on the weekends. My favorite thing about making these films is getting to work with a creature like this. Getting to work with a practical creature suit is just an unbelievably fun experience. All the actors get to work, in camera with this thing. There's no CGI. We get to have this hulking figure on set with us all the time, and it's just so much fun. Like I had mentioned earlier, being a kid who grew up watching monster movies, getting to make one and being on set with your monster, it is an experience that I can't really replicate. I spent so much time with these suits too, working on them throughout the whole year before we shoot each film, and so you get really attached to them, and it's just an absolute blast to basically direct your friends in a movie with a creature that you created.
And now we come to the Lost and Found segment, where we cover a few of the more well-known titles in the Bigfoot found footage arena to make sure that you've seen those. And then we also mention a handful of really interesting lesser-known ones that I think you may not have heard of, but I think definitely deserve a little more awareness and coverage. So please remember that everyone has different taste in what they're looking for in a Bigfoot movie. So some titles might be for you and some might not, but that doesn't mean another found footage fan won't love it. So if it's not your jam, that's fine. Just move right along to the next one. But we're a big tent here and we want to provide a little something for everyone. We'll begin with the more well-known Bigfoot movies. And for me, the one I hear the most discussion about is the 2013 film Willow Creek. Now, this film is made by comedian and former Police Academy star Bobcat Goldthwait, and it follows a couple on a camping trip to Willow Creek because the boyfriend wants to hit it big on the internet with Bigfoot research content. Now, that sounds like a pretty straightforward story, and here's the thing. What I like about this film is that it's pretty much a no-frills, two-hander wilderness thriller. Both of the leads are believable and mostly likable, and the location looks great, and the scare moments in the film really worked for me. A lot of people don't know that Bobcat Goldthwait has actually made 2 fake documentaries, although the other one, Windy City Heat, is a comedy rather than a horror film. But I think he does a great job here with a minimalist story, and if you haven't seen it, you should check it out, if for no other reason than to join the argument about whether the tent scene was effective for you, because it absolutely was for me. Now, our next title was mentioned briefly earlier, but it deserves a lot of attention and accolades, I think, because I believe it's currently the best Bigfoot found footage movie out there. It's the 2014 film Exists. I mentioned it was directed by the Blair Witch Project's Eduardo Sanchez, but what I didn't mention was that it's a really exciting movie with some really impressive action sequences. While this film is definitely low budget, Sanchez delivers some really impressive set pieces, from the chase scene on the bikes to the siege scene where the main characters are hiding in their cabin and the Sasquatch is actually trying to smash its way in. Sanchez teamed up again with writer Jamie Nash, who he had worked with previously on the suspenseful alien chamber thriller Altered. Now, the limited locations and the intense storyline from that film definitely return here, and the movie delivers big. There's even a moment of surprisingly moving emotion towards the end that I did not see coming. No question, you should absolutely watch it. And the last of our more well-known titles is 15 Things You Didn't Know About Bigfoot from 2019. Now, the original title of the film was The Vice Guide to Bigfoot. So both of these titles should tell you that this is definitely going to be satirical. The good news is, in this case, that means that it's actually funny. Not all found footage comedies go the distance and really make you laugh, but I enjoyed this one because it wasn't really making fun of Bigfoot. It's more about satirizing the kind of clickbaity infotainment journalism that has become so prevalent in recent years, and they capture that tone really well. This movie does for Bigfoot documentaries and Vice-style news documentaries what the Netflix series American Vandal did for the true crime documentary genre. It mimics it with such skill that it feels both like an actual entry in the subgenre and a clever skewering of it at the same time. And not to get off on a tangent, but you should really watch American Vandal if you like fake true crime docs. It is hilarious. And you should also watch 15 Things You Didn't Know About Bigfoot. It is currently streaming on several different platforms, so it is not hard to find, and I think that you will have fun with it. So those are the 3 more well-known Bigfoot movies. Now let's take a quick break to hear from another fantastic Bigfoot found footage filmmaker, and then I'll be back to give you the 5 more obscure recommendations.
Hi guys, Jason Mills here, director of Living with Bigfoot. Living with Bigfoot is a film about Bo. He was an eccentric character that lives in the woods claiming to know and live with Bigfoot. A news reporting team comes out to meet Bigfoot through Bo, but things take a really hilarious turn. What inspired me to make Living with Bigfoot was a found footage kind of Bigfoot movie, which is really, really cool idea, but wanted to add a comedy like touch to it, just to make something funny, do some funny things. I had some funny people. Let's put our heads together and make this funny movie. And it was fun. It was a real fun time to make. We made it up literally as we went. So the inspiration was just the people that I was around. They inspired me to make this movie. My favorite thing about Living with Bigfoot was that it was non-scripted and we never know what was going to come next. We were just making up things as we went, which was really fun to do, and just, yeah, it was just funny people being funny and having fun. That was my favorite part.
All right, we're back and we're ready to talk about the 5 lesser seen Bigfoot found footage movies. Now, I want to start with one from 2023 that references a few things we talked about earlier in the episode. The movie is called Steed's Ridge from director Dustin Grammer. Now, the premise sounds pretty straightforward. It's a small investigative team heading to the tiny titular Alabama town to look into some Sasquatch sightings. But what that description doesn't tell you is the tone of this movie. Now, remember when I mentioned the Legend of Boggy Creek and In Search Of? Now, they had a very specific charm, especially to watch them now in the modern age. The distinct accents and speech patterns of the locals, the clunky and somewhat overly dramatic narrative. There's an innocence to the style. Steed's Ridge evokes that vibe tremendously, and it does so for comedic effect. It's definitely sort of making fun of those types of movies a little bit, but definitely from a place of love. The performances are pretty big, and it's clear that the cast is having a lot of fun, and I think that you will too. Now, next up is a film from 2022 called Our Trip to Berrybrook. This one follows 3 vloggers who head into a national park in the hopes of shooting footage of a Bigfoot-like creature. And of course, they disappear, and then their footage is later found. Now, this one is an interesting one because it's actually more of a Bigfoot-adjacent movie. The 3 vloggers in the story are Americans visiting Australia to find something that is definitely in the Bigfoot family, but because Bigfoot is a mostly American and Canadian cryptid, we'll call this a Sasquatch cousin. Now, the difference in locale is a fun slight alteration to the standard framework of the Bigfoot story, and even though it's obviously in the Bigfoot story vein, it's clear that this movie was actually inspired by the Blair Witch Project, particularly in the 3rd act. And the ending of the film has, I think, a clever trick up its sleeve as well. The director, Frank Maljevac, has delved into the world of the cryptid found footage film a couple times, with his other feature film being Fierce Killer Marsupial, about an Australian folk legend called a drop bear. Now, I won't spoil the fun to be found in that movie or in this one. Our Trip to Berrybrook is available on several streaming platforms for free right now, so you should have no trouble being able to trap and capture this one. Now, the next title we're discussing is 2013's Turtle Island from director David Wexler. The plot of this one revolves around a documentary filmmaker and his 3 friends traveling into the Vermont woods in search for Bigfoot, but it turns out that Bigfoot might not be the most dramatic thing that this friend group has to deal with. As with many of the Bigfoot movies we're discussing, the plot itself isn't the thing that sets the film apart. In this case, there are 2 other interesting elements. First, this movie plays in a non-linear fashion, with quick flashes of moments from later in the story that build tension towards the eventual outcome. That's different than a lot of found footage movies, which often play out in real time in a sort of straightforward timeline, so I thought that was an interesting choice. And secondly, this is a Bigfoot film in which the concept of Bigfoot, while important to the film, ends up being secondary to some of the interesting character dynamics and a surprise conflict that probably wouldn't be the thing you would expect in a Bigfoot movie to be focused on. For an interesting change of pace, I think this one isn't super easy to find, but I think it's worth the effort for the right viewer. Now, our second to last title is 2014's Happy Camp from director Josh Anthony. The story of the film follows the main character, Michael Tanner, as he returns to his childhood home 20 years after he was last there. He has returned to the town of Happy Camp with his girlfriend and a professional documentary crew to face the haunting lack of memory surrounding his younger brother's mysterious disappearance years earlier. Now, as they explore Michael's past to uncover why he has no memory of the events, secrets about the town are slowly uncovered. Now, the most interesting thing to me about Happy Camp is that it definitely counts as a Bigfoot film, but the framing of the story for a good part of the film is actually a true crime style missing persons investigation. Now, that slight shift in the way that the film starts and is treated makes a big impact on the way that the 2 subgenres bump up against each other in interesting ways. The film is well shot, and coming from producer Drew Barrymore, it's clear that the movie was probably a more professional production than many other found footage films. Now, the movie has some mixed reviews because of the feelings about the actual design and execution of the Bigfoot itself. But regardless of your feeling about that, that one aspect of the story, I think it's definitely a worthwhile watch if you can find a streaming platform to check it out. And our final of the 5 lesser-known titles is 2013's Embedded from director Michael Bufaro. The movie follows an investigation into a little boy who has gone missing in the Rocky Mountains. A former war correspondent newscaster and his cameraman partner go to the scene to the small town to get interviews and join the search for the boy, only to discover that what everyone thinks is a rogue bear is something more mysterious and far more dangerous. Now, this is a really surprising dark horse movie. Aside from the fact that it's a solid Bigfoot movie that has a much bigger cast and way more action than I could possibly have expected, the framing of seeing the story, the entire thing, through the eyes of a member of the news media really gives it a unique perspective within the genre. I was surprised to find that this movie only has 2 reviews on Letterboxd and only a handful of reviews on IMDb, especially considering that it's made by a fairly frequent horror movie filmmaker. For Bigfoot fans who like a movie with a man in costume monster, this movie is definitely that, and it is not shy about showing the creature in the second half of the film as well. In a lot of ways, I feel like this movie tries things that are very different from the traditional Bigfoot found footage film, and that's why I think it's deserving of a look from anybody who likes this subgenre. And that brings us to the end of the lesser known but still deserving Bigfoot found footage films. Now it's time for you to do some hunting to go find those films. You wouldn't be out here if you weren't a massive found footage fan, and I sure as hell wouldn't be making this if I weren't one too. So how about we take a minute for any Bigfoot recommendations from other found footage lovers in the fan favorite segment.
I saw a movie that hit really close to home, depicting Bigfoot's natural habitat perfectly. Uwharrie, filmed in the Uwharrie National Forest bordering Albemarle, North Carolina and Troy, North Carolina. This movie adds a completely different storyline to more popular Bigfoot found footage movies.
In 1976, the 2-part television episode, The Secret of Bigfoot Pass, appeared on $6 Million Man. This was immediately followed by a novelization, which I think came out in late 76, early 77, and that seems to be ground zero for Bigfoot fiction. There have been plenty of Bigfoot nonfiction, but that seems to be where Bigfoot fiction started. And I would say most of it exists between 77 and 84. There's only about a dozen Bigfoot books out there, maybe slightly more, and they have some things in common. For one thing, Bigfoot really loves to decapitate people. In Sasquatch, Monster of the Northwest Woods, Bigfoot loves tearing off heads. He loves tearing off heads in Snow Beast. He loves tearing off heads in Snowman. But also Bigfoot has a gentler side. He's often portrayed as being at one with the universe in a book like Shadow of the Beast, or actually at the end of Snow Beast, Bigfoot's found meditating in lotus position. Bigfoot also, though, is really horny for humans. This started in 1977 with a book called Nights with Sasquatch about a female naturalist who has sex with Bigfoot, and you'll see it again and again in books like The Beast, about a female naturalist who winds up having sex with Bigfoot, but also that book has a sort of different take on it as well, because a female Bigfoot winds up having sex with humans because her Bigfoot mate's penis is far too small for her and she needs a bigger human kind of dong. In books like John Tigge's Monster, the whole book revolves around Bigfoot getting a woman pregnant, or attempting to, and you'll see this theme repeated throughout. Bigfoot also has a pungent smell in most of these books, and I have to say the ultimate Bigfoot book for me is Thomas Page's The Spirit, because this is one of the few books in which no one has sex with Bigfoot at all. They don't even think about it.
If you just can't get enough of the thrill of the hunt and you want even more Bigfoot action than we covered on this episode, have I got some good news for you. If you head over to Letterboxd, you can find a list of 38 Bigfoot found footage films. So go on over there, track your progress, and see if you can catch a few titles that you haven't seen. And as always, if you think of a movie that you think belongs on that list and you don't see it there, leave it in a comment on the Letterboxd list so I can add it. Every movie you add to a list means one less that another found footage fan has to hunt down for themselves. And before we bid farewell to Bigfoot, let's hear one last bit from the excellent filmmakers who were kind enough to share their films and their thoughts with us this episode. Special thanks to all of these phenomenal found footage filmmakers.
So once again, my name is Corey Grant, and I would like to thank the viewers for supporting found footage films.
I want to send a big shout out, thank you to all the found footage fans out there that have been kicking with it for a while. You know, it's a little subgenre within horror and sci-fi mainly. Those audiences are always pretty die-hard. They support the things that they love, and it's, you know, with their support comes the ability to continue to make them. So definitely thank y'all for supporting. We really appreciate it. I speak for all the filmmakers. We make these for an audience, and we hope they enjoy it. And I think that we done made some stuff that you guys can enjoy, and we appreciate y'all for watching and continue watching.
Big shout out and big thank you to all of the found footage fans who have helped put the Horror Dad's name out there. Without you guys, we wouldn't be, continuing to make these things seem like Tahoe Joe 1 was just sort of an experimental thing that I thought maybe it'll end up on YouTube. And the fan response was so big. Not only did we launch into production on a part 2, that went really big on Tubi, but we are actually in pre-production on part 3. So it's all because of you guys. Thank you so much for supporting indie film and for supporting our favorite genre to play in, found footage.
So guys, thanks again for watching found footage films and supporting the community. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, the trail has gone cold on Bigfoot for now, so we have reached the end of this episode. I hope that you were able to find a few movies that you didn't know about already so that you could add them to your watch list. Now, as we wrap up, do me a favor. Think of your 5 favorite found footage movies. Have you left them 5-star reviews on IMDb or Letterboxd? That one thing can make a huge impact on the movie's popularity rankings, and you never know if a stranger reading your great review could be the reason why they decide to watch it. That is the best thing, literally, that you can do right now to support found footage filmmakers. And don't forget, today's found footage fan is tomorrow's found footage filmmaker. So go grab your camera and get started, and maybe I'll be talking about your film next time. Thanks for watching.